Yo, what's up guys? It's your boy Franklin here, and today I'm going to be showcasing a somewhat old replay. This was about a couple months before Zygarde got eventually banned from OU, and the team that I'm rocking this time around is a very interesting team. Somewhat of a half ORAS, half Generation 7, with Choice Specs ash-greninja, Banded Zygarde, Z Talonflame, Assaultless Magearna, Leftovers Bulu, and Mega Diancie, which has kind of fallen from grace due to the vast plethora of many top blues that are running around in OU. And Talonflame, obviously with the nerf of Gale Winds, is not doing too well. And looking at the rest of his team is somewhat of a bulky, balanced team. A couple of defensive threats there. The most important thing for me is that I have to weaken the Toxapex, because if you look at my team, I really don't have much of a answer to Toxapex outside of Banded Zygarde. And if Zygarde gets burned, oh, this is going to be a really complicated battle for me. So knowing that Greninja does have a good lead against him, I'm going to switch out, however, because that Greninja is Protean, because it's shiny, and most importantly, it's most likely going to be packing a Scarf U-turn set. And he actually does. And I did predict that, and the Protean does go off, because why would you not have Protean shiny Greninja? Obviously, you're not going to run Torrent. So he switches out into the Greninja, and he actually goes into the Zapdos, which is kind of an odd choice since he does have the Landorus, and I feel like Landorus would have been a bigger threat to lure out the Magearna just to get rocks up or just fire off an Earthquake. He goes for the Heat Wave, and I fortunately miss, and as I go for the Volt Switch because I'm not staying in, but I really wanted to get some chip off of the Zapdos, and I go into the big boy Zygarde. This is a Generation 6 event Zygarde that I got from ORAS, because you saw the Cherish Ball that it came out of. So it gets up a little bit of the leftovers, and me packing the Banded 1,000 Arrows, I don't care, I'm about to fire it off. It won't do too much since Zapdos is technically going to not be super effective hit by it. This is part flying. He does switch out into the Landorus Darien form, and I get intimidated as I fire off a Banded 1,000 Arrows. And judging by this damage, if I was not intimidated, this could have done some pretty decent damage. But unfortunately, I'm gonna have to switch out because I hate being intimidated, especially when I'm banded. And I'm gonna go into my Talonflame on the off chance that he actually does go for the Earthquake and or Hidden Power Ice or the Rocks. And I do get in the Talonflame just before the Rocks up. Now here, I kind of make a misplay because I do carry the Swords Dance here. And I probably should have just gone for it since his team is kind of weak against this. He goes into the Toxapex expecting, the Flying Z, which I actually do pop it right here and right now. And obviously because of the nerfing that they did to Talonflame with its ability, it's not really that great of a Pokemon anymore. And don't get me wrong, Talonflame Generation 6 was super annoying because Gale Wings, if you guys have been living under a rock, in Generation 6 didn't matter based on the amount of HP. All it means is if you had a flying type move on it, it's going to be a priority. But in this generation, if it's not a full HP, that priority is gone. I go for the taunt on Talonflame, and the off chance that he actually does go for the recover or the toxic, which he actually does, which is great. And now the only thing Talonflame can do is just attack me. Or I should say Toxapex going to do is just attack me. But he switches out, making a smart play here as he goes into the Zapdos. Perfectly fine with me. Not much I can do here, but I am just indeed going to go for the Swords Dance here. And I'm trying to get the +2. I probably should have just gone for this move as soon as the Landorus was switched out, because it would have done a lot of damage against his team. And so I go for the Flare Blitz, just gauging how much damage this does. And it does quite a lot, believe it or not. Makes me think that this is more of a physically defensive Zapdos. Goes for the Discharge and unfortunately knocks me out. So Talonflame, although doesn't pick up the kill, it kind of starts the momentum of this Zapdos being a less problematic Pokemon. And so now I'm going to go into my Mega Diancie, because obviously this is a good counter against the Zapdos. Expecting him to actually switch out, I just go for the Rocks here. But he goes for the Roost, which, oh no, kind of made sense. He probably was predicting me to stay in and get the Rocks up, which is kind of a good play on his part. But the issue with this play is one or two things. One is that it just draws in Zygarde, and his team doesn't really have a reliable Zygarde answer outside of the Landers. And 2, ash-greninja would be able to pluck his team away if somehow, on the off chance the Toxapex does get flinched by a Dark Pulse sweep. So, it's an okay play, I guess, but regardless, here we are. So he does switch out the Zapdos, and he goes into the Mimikyu. I was expecting him to go into the Scizor since it can take a Diamond Storm. But regardless, I'm not here to judge, I'm here to win. So, I go for the Diamond Storm, able to pop the little guy's disguise ability, which it does right here. And so I'm thinking, I wonder what this Mimikyu is actually going to do to me. And so what I do here is I go for another Diamond Storm, just in the off chance I can get my defense up by +2. And does quite a bit to the Mimikyu, and almost knocks it out. And I do indeed get the +2, just in case. But this Mimikyu is carrying a 50% HP berry. Or not, I just lied. It was a citrus berry. Pretty interesting. It goes for the pain split. Doesn't do too much to me, it doesn't do much to him since I barely have any HP. Or I do, but just my base HP is not that much. So he goes into the Red Saiyan, which is the Scizor, and this should have been his first choice of an answer to Mega Diancie, so I don't know why he goes into it now. So I fire off a Diamond Storm, which is pretty crucial since that damage did over 50%. But of course, he is going to Mega Evolve and he's going to gain a little boost in defense as the HP stays the same when usually when Pokemon Mega Evolve. So he will be able to take the next Diamond Storm, but it puts it at a very precarious range. It goes for the Bullet Punch. Now I have my defense boosted, but I barely lived the Bullet Punch. I go for another Diamond Storm, and funny enough, I do end up getting the +2 here. But it's too little too late for this little Mega Diancie. But Mega Diancie did his job in keeping the kind of a crazy counter against it at very low HP. Because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, I believe, my Greninja. Because I want to Mega Evolve. I want to transform right off the bat so I can start doing damage against that Toxapex. Now, is there a reason for him to keep the Mega Scizor? I'm not too sure. But regardless, he does go into the Toxapex, and it is at full HP, which is kind of annoying. But here we are. It does take the rocks damage, and I'm going to go for the Dark Pulse, just because I want to get some damage right off the bat. And does pretty good amount, believe it or not. Now, this is kind of a roll. Now, I'm not sure if my opponent wanted to stay in here, but regardless, I go for the Dark Pulse, hoping that there's a God, and I get rid of this monstrosity that is Toxapex. But unfortunately, I'm not able to. And it just recovers half of its HP and another 6% because of Black Sludge. And so I'm thinking here, there's no way he's going to click Toxic. There's no way he's going to click Scald here. So he does switch out the Toxapex into his Shuriken, which is kind of an odd play because I decide, well, either I could have switched out, but regardless, I stay in. And I was thinking about switching on to my Zygarde, but now this Greninja is taking unnecessary damage. And since this is his only Scarfer on the team, and his speed control, getting a weaken is a very good hope for me to win. So I go into the Magearna, which is the obvious defensive answer. This thing isn't going to do too much to my Magearna, since Magearna's job is kind of whatever, because it's only going to be a defensive answer to Zapdos. Because I do carry a pretty interesting special attacking set. Obviously with the Salt Vest, I'm only allowed to carry 4 attacking moves, so it's whatever. So this Zapdos is going to take some rocks damage, and obviously it showcases the pressure ability, which means that I don't have to worry about contact moves paralyzing me as punishment. So this Zapdos goes for the Heat Wave, but then I think he realizes here is like, that wasn't a good play because I'm a Salt Vest. I can take all these hits. So I'm going to go for the Volt Switch again here, and now is my opportunity to get in Greninja. And Greninja's Dark Pulse is in the range of it to knock it out since I am Choice Specs. And because since Zapdos is very physically defensive, it's not going to take a Specs Dark Pulse very well. So realizing that, he does switch out the Zapdos and goes into the Mimikyu here. And the Mimikyu is kind of useless at this point since it's been popped of its ability. But it's a good news for me since I'm able to get off its Battle Bond. Whoa, that's a complete different Pokemon. So I get off the Battle Bond effect for Greninja, and now it becomes part of the third Hokage and transforms into the beautiful ash-greninja. And now Dark Pulse is a very big prominent problem for my opponent. Goes into the Greninja, but this Greninja is in a timer in terms of switches since rocks are on play. Obviously, I'm not going to stay in because this Greninja is going to be the key for victory. So I switch out and go into the Magearna. As always, this is the only good play I can do because if I lose my ash-greninja, it's pretty much over. So he goes for the U-turn, and this is only confirming more and more that this is actually Scarf. It's not anything else crazy since U-turn is only doing 10 to my Magearna. So he switches out into the Landorus, and Landorus here is, is going to threaten me out quite a bit as it's getting chip damage. Gets off the Intimidate on my Magearna, which doesn't really matter to me at all. Now I do want to preserve the Magearna for the Scarf Greninja, so I do go into a Tapu Bulu, expecting either an Earthquake to come out of this Landorus, and this is the first time the Tapu Bulu is going to be taking into battle. So I get the Grassy Terrain up, completely fine with me. As expected, he just goes for the Earthquake and doesn't do too much to me since I'm a Bulu with Grassy Terrain. And because I am leftovers here, it should signify that I am more of a defensive variation of Tapu Bulu. That Earthquake did absolutely nothing, of course, as expected. So he goes for the Defog, trying to get rid of the rocks, primarily because he wants Zapdos to stay alive and for the Toxapex to not neglect its Black Sludge recovery. So I go for the Hornleech just to see what kind of Landorus this is. Does quite a bit. I gain some HP back, but then I realize that I lose some HP. So it was indeed a bulky Landorus, as it has the Rocky Helmet. And so, knowing that he probably may not want to keep the Landorus, or maybe he wants to go in for the Zapdos, he goes for the rocks since he got rid of my rocks. And because my main rocker is gone, he has taken the advantage of getting his own rocks up. And I go in for the Hornleech, and I'm able to knock out one actual gigantic threat against my Magearna, which is pretty awesome. So after my Bulu takes some Rocky Helmet damage, that Landorus is going bye-bye. So now, the expected play for him is to go into the Zapdos. I don't think he would want to risk the Mega Scizor, since I could carry Superpower. But he does go into the Zapdos here, as his pressure goes on. And I really don't need Bulu at this point anymore. So I expect him to stay in and go for the Roost just to get all of his HP back. And so he actually does get all the HP back. And I go for the Synthesis just to recover and just to see what he was going to do. Because I had a feeling he was going to click Heat Wave. But he doesn't. So with the Grassy Terrain still in effect, obviously we don't have any ground type moves outside of Thousand Arrows. So goes into the Toxapex here. Completely fine by me. And I predict him going to the Toxapex by going into the Zygarde. And luckily for me, I believe the terrain ends on this turn. I take some rock damage, but it doesn't really matter to me. And now that the Zygarde is at full HP, and the Toxapex, unfortunately, the cancer that it is at full HP. After another round of Black Sludge. So yes, indeed that the Grassy Terrain does get out of battle, and now it's 4-on-4, and now I'm about to put in some massive work. So I go for the 1,000 Arrows here, expecting him to Scald, and that does a lot of damage. Now this Toxapex most likely is a defensive variant, a physically defensive variant, of course. Goes for the Toxic, and here I'm like, looking at the rest of his team, and looking at my team, Zygarde can kind of put in work against his team, especially when it's banded and did so much damage. And I think he realized at this point that he cannot afford his Toxapex to faint. Otherwise, the rest of the team just kind of loses or auto loses to ash-greninja. So he goes into his Super Saiyan, the Green Saiyan himself, Broly, because it's green. And as I go for another round of 1,000 Arrows, I'm not able to knock the Mega Scizor out. So that's another Magearna check that I don't have to worry about. But I believe my Magearna was carrying Hidden Power Fire, so it didn't really matter too much. Now he does go into the Greninja here, and I'm thinking, well, do I really need Zygarde at this point? Because his Zapdos is kind of weakened, but me being the careful player that I am, always going to make the right play and go into Magearna, because I cannot risk losing to a Scarf Pre-Zygarde. So this time he actually goes for the Ice Beam, trying to catch me off guard. I'm like, that's not doing too much to me because I am a bulky Magirna. And obviously he's not going to stay in because this is his only win con at this point that gives us speed control. And knowing me, I'm just going to attack what's in front of me because that's the only thing I can do. And I go for the Volt Switch, expecting to switch out. And now I can bring in the big boy Zygarde here. And since Zygarde is adamant, that's why the 1,000 Arrows is going to do a little more. But unfortunately, because since Zapdos is flying at this point, 1,000 Arrows isn't going to one-hit KO it before it removes its flying type. So I take another round of toxic damage, and now I'm going to fire 1,000 Arrows, and I expect myself to be much faster, since even though I am adamant, Zapdos don't tend to run much speed, probably like about 16 to 24 EVs, as he goes for the Hidden Power Ice, and it does quite enough to knock me out. And it was a crit, unfortunately, so I was like, oh well, it's going to come down to my ash-greninja now. But the good thing is that since ash-greninja is relatively strong as hell against this team, and since the Zapdos is weakened enough, Zygarde did its part as well, and not only by claiming the kill on the Mega Scizor, but also weakening the Zapdos, and now ash-greninja, with its prominent Choice Specs Dark Pulse combination, is able to knock that thing out of the park. And now in comes his Greninja here, and like I said, there's only one thing I'm going to do here. I'm not risking this win con. My opponent knows that. So I'm going to go into my Magirna here one last time, as always, making the right plays. Goes for the U-turn because that's the only move that probably has that can knock me out. The other moves is probably like Ice Beam, Rock Slide, Low Kick, but Low Kick is super risky. So U-turns out and goes into the only Pokemon he has left, which is the Toxapex. And obviously, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go for the U-turn. Not the U-turn, the electric cousin of U-turn, which is Volt Switch. In that case, I do. Obviously, I'm not really special attack invested, but I did quite a little bit of chip. So, what I'm going to go into here is my Greninja. And I realize that Stealth Rocks are putting my Greninja on a timer in terms of switches. But because I am Ash Greninja now, I'm able to put in some work. So he goes into the recover because he doesn't want to risk this, losing. Because if he went to Toxic, that would have been a losing play on his part. And so my only goal here is to win with Ash Greninja at this point. And so what he does is just stay in, and he's going to have to take this massive amount of damage from Dark Pulse, and does quite a bit. He goes for a Toxic. Which is a whatever play. And so now there's a decision to be made. And that is whether or not he wants to stay in. So because Toxapex is only win con, and because my Ash Greninja is indeed on a timer, he's going to go into his only win con, which is the Protean Greninja. I'm able to fire off the Dark Pulse here, and I'm able to knock out his only speed control. So now with that out of the way, my Ash Greninja can kind of put in work at this point. But it's on a timer because of toxic damage. So now, looking at the Toxapex here, I can either do two things. Either I have to flinch this or get a crit. So, go for the Dark Pulse here. Doesn't do enough, but it flinches the Toxapex. And that's a GG. A masterpiece using somewhat of a mix of Generation 6 Pokemon to knock out this cancer of a Pokemon. So now I get the luck on my side, and I go for a Dark Pulse, and as I'm able to knock this thing out. Does the flinch matter? Yeah, it kind of does, because it sped up the game, of course. But nonetheless, I believe with another round of recovery, I'm not sure if it was going to be able to sustain another Dark Pulse, because the chances of, it's only going to be a matter of time before I flinch or get a crit. But anyways, we won. Thank goodness. Generation 6 Pokemon did somewhat decent, but whatever, we got the victory, which is most important. So, thank you guys for watching. It's your boy Franklin, signing out.